Good morning, Cubaneros. We're all pretty much familiar with Darwinism, defined as the survival of the fittest species and the competition for existence. And as Charles Darwin's researches were conducted, at the same time as the rise of free trade industrialism in Great Britain, they were seized on as an intellectually uh, and scientific justification for class domination in Britain, and in turn of Britain's empire, in colonizing and dominating supposedly lesser races. It didn't take long for these ideas to reach the free market USA in their most vulgar form. Social Darwinism's greatest Eurasian disciple was Yale political science professor William Graham Sumner, who argued that, and I quote, millionaires are a product of natural selection, acting on the whole body of men to pick out those who can meet the requirements of certain work to be done. It is because they are thus selected that wealth, both their own and that entrusted to them, aggregates under their hands. They may be fairly regarded as the natural selected agents of society for certain work. They get high wages and live in luxury, but the bargain is a good one for society. There is the intensest competition for their place and occupation. This assures us that all who are competent for this function will be employed in it, so that the cost of it will be reduced to the lowest terms. This quotation of late 19th century social biology should have a very modern smell to it, as its modern neoliberal economics given a basis in natural law, trying to turn the democratic, egalitarian natural law of the Enlightenment on its head by combining natural science with traditional theology, in this case, low church Calvinism, recreating the theology of predestination to protect inherited wealth and class privilege, immoralizing against the poor majority, that if they remain poor, it's the fault of their own lazy natures and vices, more proof of the natural superiority of the natural elite, in whom all must necessarily be entrusted, according to Professor Sumner. Nazism would later take this asocial Darwinist biology to its most extreme and violent interpretation. Of course, ironically, Marx would interpret this whole neo-Darwinian scheme in opposite terms. The real fittest class of nature were the producers, those selected by the natural unfolding of historic law to dominate human society by reason of labor's creative capacity. Class wars as a social manifestation of the natural struggle for survival by controlling the means of production, the victor condemning the loser to eventual extinction. Those who would thus condemn Marxism as incompatible with democracy seem totally blind as to their own interpretation of social law. That has as little to do with the consent of the governed as, say, rape has to do with consensual intercourse. But there's a larger question here of social Darwinism as a true representation of the state of nature, as it's commonly understood, based on competition and struggle for survival, with the fittest emerging from this war of all against all. Well, as this is based on observed and quantified behavior, it does reflect natural reality. But it's not the whole story of the natural world. There is another side, deliberately avoided, I believe, by natural social biologists for ideological reasons, not scientific ones. And that is that cooperation and mutual aid is just as much a part of nature as competition. This is a lost aspect of natural history in academic life, especially American natural biology, that is perhaps as foreign to us as the dark side of the moon, but common sense alone should tell you it's there. Unfortunately, we have more qualified evidence. French naturalist Elisée Reclus and Russian libertarian socialist Peter Kropotkin demonstrated the principle of mutual assistance from insect colonies to fish schools, mammal herds, and finally in human societies, organized first around family clans, and retaining this natural collective basis as clans would evolve into villages, and these into ethnic tribes, and finally even into nations. Even modern globalization is based on the theory of mutual aid. We're all on this earth together, the global village, even if asocial Darwinism remains everyday business as usual. We're also told that any intervention in this survival of the fittest scheme is against nature, having the state supporting sick folks, old people, allowing poor children to survive and breed, allowing workers to exercise funny ideas of grabbing a bigger piece of nature's pie, is artificial interference in the natural order of things. But it's just as forced, just as artificial, just as unnatural for 1% of a species to hog 60% of its resources and goods, to have this unnatural imbalance enforced by law and financial codes and microscopic fine print, by legal bureaucracies and layers of armed force whose primary function is to protect the privileges of the few against the claims of the many. There is not a collective of ants or herd of elephants on Earth who maintains itself on such a social principles. To believe that such an arrangement is the law of nature at work as proof that humans are therefore of a higher order than ants or elephants because their individuality separates them from the herd, from the collective, as proof of human superiority to all other species, is to willfully and dishonestly ignore the fact that such arrangements were not possible even among humans until man became detached and sheltered from nature in cities, which in themselves originated in the need for mutual aid and defense, not as platforms for individual exceptionalism. Of course, our greater sense of self is what makes us human, and human society becomes human as individual consciousness evolves. But that individual consciousness always develops hand in hand with the ethics of mutual aid. All religions at their core are based on it, at least among fellow believers, as well as all human legal systems. Any study of nature and society that focuses only on individualism and competition and the struggle of all against all shortchanges the world of nature and the possibilities of human growth. So, Canuck on the phone interrupted my latest relevant rant. Hello? Dred Scott, weren't you the runaway slave the U.S. Supreme Court said had no rights a white man was obliged to respect? You'd what? You'd like us to know that natural law gave you as much right to be human as your former owner? That he had no natural right to take yours away? And so there's no absolute property rights over another that nature is obliged to respect? Well, good thing you haven't seen the Supreme Court at work lately, because now you know you don't even have to be a living human being to have property rights over fellow men. Oh, wait, fellow men? What an archaic socialist idea that is. As outdated as you seeking freedom in Wisconsin territory.